There's a specific kind of quiet only a country morning can give you, wide and honest. And that's the silence I bought 18 years ago when I finally checked out of the military life. I remember that day. The sun hadn't quite cleared the eastern ridge of my barn yet, and a low mist was clinging to the pasture grass like it didn't want to let go, just like a good memory. My boots crunched soft and measured on the gravel as I headed out to check the main water line near the north boundary fence. Just another Tuesday on the Ironwood Creek Ranch. After 22 years of infantry deployments and then logistics, of fighting wars and living with noise that tears the soul, I didn't want cities. Didn't want concrete. I wanted this land, this space. Eleanor, my late wife, she picked out the oaks that line the drive. They're tall enough now they nearly touch the morning sky. She passed 10 years back, but every single fence post, every patch of clover still beats with her fingerprints. We didn't have kids, just the animals, and the hundreds of acres that gave me back my quiet. And I've grown particularly fond of the bulls, Grizz and Kodiak, the two dominant boys in the South Paddock. They're massive, powerful animals, easily 1.5 tons each, but I raise them by hand so they're gentle with me. They're territorial, though. Very territorial. That morning I noticed Kodiak was already agitated, snorting, pacing the fence line. I figured maybe it was a coyote again, or perhaps a mountain lion. But then, I heard tires. Not the familiar crunch of my truck on the driveway. Not the sound of a neighbor using the code. This was a low, slow roll of tires on soft grass. I stepped away from the water line and narrowed my eyes toward the far tree line, the part of my property closest to the new suburban development that had sprung up over the last decade, the Crestview Commons. Used to be all woods and open fields down there. Now it's cookie-cutter houses with beige vinyl siding and an HOA that acts like they own the whole county. That's when I saw it. A gleaming white luxury SUV, brand new, creeping along the old service path. A path that, legally, runs entirely on my side of the property line. The Crestview Commons Homeowners Association, or the HOA, had tried for years to claim they had the right to enforce visual standards on my fences, my barn, even on my livestock. Laughable, considering I'm zoned agricultural and have full county-level documentation exempting me from their reach. But that never stopped them from trying to police what they couldn't own. The SUV stopped. The door popped open, and out stepped a woman I'd come to recognize too well. Shoulder-length platinum blonde hair, oversized designer sunglasses, and a clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Brenda Thorne, the HOA president. She didn't even bother closing the car door. Just started marching right through the misty field like she was surveying her own backyard. I let out a long sigh, pulled my phone out of my pocket and hit record, holding it low but steady. Years of dealing with this board taught me one thing: document absolutely everything. They lie boldly, and they count on people being too polite, too unsure, or too exhausted to fight back. I walked toward the reinforced fence that separated the service path from the main southern pasture. Brenda had already stepped over the posted private property no trespassing sign mounted clearly on the timber gate. It was big, red, reflective. There was absolutely no way she didn't see it. I raised my voice as I approached, not yelling, but just clear and calm. The Army taught me how to command attention with stillness. "You're on private land, ma'am," I called. She turned, plastering a smile on her face that wasn't really a smile. "Mr. Stone, I'm just doing a routine compliance sweep. No need to get worked up. Compliance with what?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction here." She waved her clipboard like a priest blessing a demon. "There have been complaints about the condition of your south fence, the smell, and some residents reported livestock noises at all hours. This entire subdivision is under Covenant Block 11. Per that, all properties within 500 feet of the primary perimeter fall under visual standards." "Your fencing." "No, ma'am," I cut in, walking slowly toward the line. "That clause was invalidated when the parcel split happened back in 2005. My land is grandfathered in and outside HOA control. I've had that confirmed by the county twice." She smiled wider. "That fake, patronizing kind that women like her think can mask contempt." "Well, It's possible the documents have changed recently. Mr. Stone, perhaps you should update your files. I stopped at the gate and gestured to the bold lettering beside me. Even if they had, this is trespassing. You're on private property. You need to leave now. She turned to look at her pristine SUV, then back at me. I'll be filing a report. You're becoming aggressive. That animal noise this morning. I could hear it from my kitchen window. You moved next to a working farm, I said flatly. The bulls aren't ornamental. With that, she huffed, turned on her expensive heels, and marched back to her SUV. I didn't say another word, but I kept the video running and caught everything. Her ignoring the sign, stepping onto my property, and claiming authority she didn't possess. I had no idea then how important that little clip would become. She pulled her car out the same way she came in, tires rutting my pasture and scattering the dew. Grizz and Kodiak watched from behind the reinforced fence, ears flicking, tails twitching. Kodiak snorted again, harder this time. He didn't like her scent. I didn't either, but I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, I was hosing down the loading bay around 9 when I heard tires again. Not on gravel, again on grass. I stood up straight, wiping my hands on a rag, and walked around the corner of the barn. There she was, Brenda in the same white SUV, but this time she wasn't alone. A man in khakis and a golf shirt climbed out, late 40s, red HOA lanyard around his neck, clipboard matching hers. And a third person, a woman with a measuring tape and what looked like a digital camera. They walked right through the gate again. No knock, no call, no respect. Mr. Stone, Brenda said brightly as I approached. Glad you're here. We're conducting a preliminary inspection of your fence perimeter. Concerns regarding structure, visual degradation, and potential impact on surrounding property values. I stood there silently. The woman with the measuring tape stepped back a bit, clearly unsure. You're trespassing, I said, voice steady. Brenda blinked, tilting her head. Actually, she said, per the shared easement guidelines filed with the county under Article 7, Section B, we're allowed a 3-foot survey offset for safety compliance. I raised an eyebrow, fighting a smile. That guideline applies to shared HOA green spaces, not private agricultural land exempt under Resolution 05241. This is my property entirely, and you're standing 10 feet inside the boundary. Not 3. The man with the clipboard was shifting uneasily. Brenda, he muttered, maybe we should verify the documents before. We have every right to ensure the neighborhood remains safe and compliant, she cut in sharply, then turned to me again. If you have an issue with our presence, perhaps you should attend our open board meeting next Thursday. The invitation was sent. I threw it in the burn barrel, I said. Like every other notice you people send. Her nostrils flared, but she kept smiling. I pulled out my phone again. I'm going to need all of you to leave immediately. You've been warned. I've got the footage from yesterday. This is your second documented violation. The woman with the measuring tape was already walking back to the SUV. The man hesitated, then followed. Brenda stood her ground a few seconds longer, just long enough to glare at the bulls, who were calm today but watching. What's the name of that one? She asked, pointing toward Kodiak. The big one. Kodiak, I confirmed. Figures, she muttered. Then she turned and walked away. That night I called Lou, my lawyer friend from my Army days who now practices real estate law. I sent him the videos and asked for his take. His text came back just before midnight. She's in clear violation. You've got a solid case. Don't escalate. Just document everything. And if she crosses the line again, literally call the sheriff. Not local. Go County Lou was right. Our local precinct often played softball with the HOA. They donated to the same pancake breakfasts. If it came down to it, I'd have to go higher. I went down to the county recorder's office the next day and spoke to Maggie, an old friend who worked the desk. I left with a stack of certified records, easement maps, exemption clauses, everything I needed. I put it all into a weatherproof folder and stuck it in my truck's glove compartment. Let Brenda try. When I got back to the ranch, something felt off. Kodiak and Grizz were pacing again. I walked the perimeter once more, and there it was. Fresh tire marks in the mud, right up to the edge of the southern pasture, but no vehicle was visible. They had driven up here again, and this time they were careful not to leave the SUV visible from the house. But Kodiak had seen them, and Kodiak didn't forget. I placed a motion-triggered military-grade game cam in the big oak tree facing the fence, then another one near the gate. Silent eyes ready to catch whatever snake slithered back in. I knew the storm wasn't in the sky. It was in Brenda's head. She was pushing, waiting for me to crack, and I knew she'd step over the line again soon. But I never imagined how soon. It was 2 days later when the quiet broke. I was in the barn by 6, finishing the morning feed, when Grizz's deep bellow echoed off the ridge. It was a short, loud, guttural warning. Kodiak followed a second later, snorting so hard it sounded like a truck's exhaust. I stepped outside, and there it was again. The dull crunch of tires on soft gravel, moving slow, cautious. Then the white SUV appeared at the bottom of the service road. Only this time, it didn't stop near the gate. It kept going. I froze. Brenda had driven into the pasture road. She bypassed the main timber gate entirely and nudged her vehicle past the split-rail section near the creek, an area I hadn't thought to barricade because no sane person would ever try to drive through it. But there she was, tires sloshing through half-dried mud and cow tracks, inching deeper onto my property like she owned it. My heart hammered against my ribs. Kodiak and Grizz were already alert. They stood in the far end of the field, muscles rigid, tails stiff. Brenda's SUV paused about 30 feet from the reinforced gate of the southern paddock. The bulls were behind that fence for now, but I knew my animals. That gate had been latched earlier, but with the mud and last night's wind, sometimes it didn't set right. I broke into a jog across the field, my boots sucking into the damp ground with every step. "Stop the car!" I yelled. Brenda didn't. She opened her door and stepped out, heels sinking into the mud, phone in hand, holding it up like a badge. "I'm taking evidence of livestock code violations," she shouted. "The stench from here is overwhelming." "You're trespassing!" I roared. "Get back in the car!" Too late. Kodiak let out a roar. I looked to the gate. Open. Just a crack, but open. The latch hadn't caught. I saw it in Brenda's eyes, the moment her self-righteous confidence evaporated into raw panic. The two bulls began a slow, deliberate walk toward her. Not a stampede, not yet, but you don't need a stampede when each animal weighs over 3,000 pounds. "Get in the car," I screamed again. She fumbled, dropped her phone, dove halfway into the front seat, slammed the door, and gunned the engine. The wheels spun uselessly, kicking up wet earth. Kodiak began to trot. Then Grizz followed. In seconds, they were charging. Brenda's SUV jerked forward, tires finally catching grip, but she turned too hard. Her front wheel smacked against a buried root, bounced, and sent the vehicle sharply toward the fence. The bulls were already closing in, snorting, bellowing, foam flying, and then it happened. Grizz hit the rear passenger panel first. Shoulder first, a full-force slam like a freight train. The SUV rocked violently, the metal caving inward with a sickening crunch. Brenda's scream tore through the air, high and unnatural. Kodiak hit second, his massive head and horns grazing the front panel, knocking the bumper clean off. The vehicle lurched sideways into the wooden fence, posts splintering beneath its weight. She hit the horn, frantic and useless. I ran as fast as I could, waving my arms, shouting, trying to distract them, to redirect the bulls. They weren't attacking her. They were attacking the noise, the movement, the trespass. Back! Kodiak, back! Miraculously, Grizz stopped short of the second hit. He wheeled around, snorting, kicking up dirt like a warning. Kodiak followed suit. They both backed off, just barely, still puffed up, eyes wide, but unwilling to cross the full line into carnage. Brenda sat in the driver's seat, frozen. Her windshield was cracked. The side of the SUV looked like it had been mauled by giants. I opened the back gate and slowly, methodically, led the bulls into the adjacent paddock using a grain bucket and calm words. 5 minutes later, I walked back toward the wreckage. Brenda finally opened her window a crack. You have monsters on your land?" she hissed, her voice shaking. "You drove into their pasture," I replied, my voice low and controlled. "There are 6 no trespassing signs between here and the last gate. I warned you. I called the sheriff. You're going to pay for this," she snapped, fumbling for her phone only to remember she dropped it in the mud. "I think your insurance will handle that," I said, "assuming they don't drop you for gross negligence." She screamed then, not words, just pure primal rage and humiliation, and slammed her hand against the steering wheel. Her car horn blared like an alarm. I pulled out my phone and hit record again. "This is private property," I said clearly. "You trespassed. I told you to leave. You crossed into a livestock area, and you caused the damage." The county deputy arrived 20 minutes later. Brenda tried to twist the story, but I had the video, the timestamps, the tire tracks. The deputy looked at my certified property documents, then looked back at Brenda. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "you're lucky you weren't killed. This man warned you multiple times. He has it all on record. If you try to file anything against him, we will refer the case to the district attorney with trespassing and reckless endangerment charges on you." Brenda didn't speak, didn't blink. She just sat there as her SUV hissed, dented and steaming in the mud. That wasn't the end, of course. People like Brenda don't admit defeat gracefully. 3 days later, I was fixing the fence when a courier handed me a plain manila envelope. Inside, a legal notice: cease and desist. Accusations of negligent livestock handling, willful endangerment, and a bizarre claim that I had trained my bulls to be territorial weapons. She was launching a full-scale offensive, trying to flip the narrative. I called Lou. "This is a bluff," he said. "She's trying to rattle you, force you to remove the animals. Don't bite. They just need noise to drag you into court." "What do I do?" I asked. "You need to flip the script, Jed," Lou replied. "Make her the aggressor again. Catch her in something bigger." 2 days later, my neighbor, a decent guy named Jason who hated the HOA, whispered that Brenda was planning a community walkthrough that Sunday morning to collect visual evidence. If she wanted to cross the line again, I'd be ready. I reinforced the paddock gate again. I installed 2 more trail cameras. And then I brought out the big tool, a portable military-grade infrared motion sensor kit I'd helped develop years ago. Perfectly legal, perfectly invisible. Sunday morning, 5 of them arrived. Brenda, dressed in all white like some avenging angel of lawn regulations. They walked the fence line, snapping photos, talking loudly, narrating for their imaginary jury. "This area shows clear signs of rot," Brenda declared near the old gate. "This pile of feed bags violates Visual Compliance Zone B," her assistant chirped. They hadn't crossed yet. 5 feet, 4 feet. And then Brenda took one final deliberate step over the property line. Snap. The motion sensor blinked red, and I stepped out from the barn with a slight smile. "Smile for the camera," I said. "You just broke a cease and desist order." She froze. Her assistant turned pale. "You're being recorded, Brenda," I continued, my voice calm but carrying. "And not just by me. My lawyer has live time-stamped alerts from 3 surveillance systems, and we're streaming to the county sheriff's office in 10 minutes. She stammered. We were invited. This is a community. This is private land," I cut in. "Your notice claimed I was a danger, but I haven't left my fence. You just stepped inside it again. That's trespassing." Just then, a set of tires crunched onto my front driveway, the confident, weighty crunch that only a government-issued SUV can make. Lights on, decals clean and unmistakable. County Sheriff Deputy Marks stepped out. He nodded at me first. "Mr. Stone, got your message. You say they crossed again?" I stepped aside and gestured to the red blinking motion sensor still mounted under the pine limb. "They stepped 6 feet onto my land at 9:12 a.m. I've got it on camera with live motion sensor logs, time-stamped by 2 cloud backups." Deputy Marks turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, is that true?" She straightened her back. "We were conducting a necessary safety inspection in response to community concerns. Did you have permission to enter Mr. Stone's property?" "We assumed—" "That's a no," the deputy interrupted. Brenda went on a tear about the dangerous animals and how I trained the bulls like weapons. Deputy Marks just looked at me. I pulled up the footage of the SUV incident on my phone. She drove into a livestock pasture past 4 signs. She was never attacked. She spooked the animals, panicked, and crashed into the fence. "The body cam from that day supports my account," Brenda shrieked. "He's manipulating everything." That was it. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in certainty. I took 2 steps forward and looked her right in the eye. "You've stood on my land," I said, my voice quiet, but every word felt like a stone dropping. "You've lied about it. You filmed me, accused me, insulted my animals, tried to twist public perception, and now you're claiming I've turned bulls into weapons. You know what I have done, Brenda? I've kept to myself. I've built my fences, paid my taxes. I've cared for this land every damn day since my wife passed. And you walked into my grief like it was your front yard." The air went dead silent. Deputy Marks cleared his throat. "I'm going to recommend that the HOA cease all physical inspections involving Mr. Stone's property immediately," he announced. "Continued trespass will escalate to criminal charges. You've been warned enough." Brenda tried to protest, but her board members were already backing away like rats from a sinking ship. She climbed into her car and slammed the door. As she reversed down my driveway, I caught one last look at her face, tight with rage, bitter with embarrassment. And behind it all, finally, defeat. The next day, an official letter arrived from the HOA, a formal apology, signed by 3 board members, not including Brenda. It confirmed my exemption status and suspended all future inspections indefinitely. I never needed revenge. I had my land, my peace, my bulls, my fence. What she tried to take wasn't just a piece of property. It was my freedom, my identity. She failed, not because I shouted louder, but because I knew the law and I had the patience to document every single mistake she made. Within a week of that final confrontation, the County Ethics Review Board got involved thanks to my detailed affidavit. They audited the HOA's entire history of enforcement. Brenda Thorne was publicly forced to resign as president, citing personal stress and safety concerns. I never saw Brenda again. Rumor had it she sold her house at a loss and moved out of state. That late spring, I rebuilt the last section of the southern fence, the one that had splintered under the weight of her SUV and Kodiak's righteous fury. The weather was warm, the soil dry enough to tamp the posts deep and firm. I worked alone that morning because there's a certain poetry in rebuilding something that others tried to tear down. It's about reclaiming your space, both physical and emotional. Kodiak wandered over as I hammered in the last rail, chewing slowly, watching. "You remember all of it, don't you?" I said to him, smiling. He just blinked and swatted a fly with his tail. I'd learned something important through all that noise. When peace is threatened, you can't just retreat deeper into solitude. Sometimes you have to step out. Speak up and draw the line, not just on a map, but in the dirt with your own hands and your own will, and then you have to make it stick. I didn't win because I was stronger or louder. I won because I was willing to wait, to document, and to understand the system better than the bully who was trying to abuse it. And now the rest of the county knows where the line is. 2. So let me ask you this. If you were Jed Stone, knowing Brenda Thorne had lied, trespassed, and nearly got herself killed attempting to ruin your livelihood, would you have still called the county sheriff? Or would you have let her sit there in the mud until the tow truck arrived? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me, what's the craziest HOA power trip you've ever witnessed? Peace out and watch your boundaries.